Hi everyone, my name is Coriana, and today in this video I'm going to break down how police use of force is evaluated in the United States under two major Supreme Court cases, Graham versus Connor and Tennessee versus Garner. These cases are important because they set national legal standards that police departments must follow when deciding when force is reasonable and when it becomes excessive. Let's start with Graham versus Connor, the case that established what we call the objective reasonableness standard. This case involved Thorne Graham, a black diabetic man who was having a medical emergency and behaving erratically as he tried to get orange juice. Police stopped him because they thought something suspicious was going on. Even after being told he was in medical distress, the officers threw him on the ground, handcuffed him, and injured him. Graham sued, claiming excessive force. The Supreme Court ruled that police use of force must be judged under the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable seizures, but the court added something important. Force must be evaluated from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, not through 20/20 hindsight. So how do the courts decide if force is excessive? Graham gave us three main factors. 1, the severity of the crime. If someone is suspected of a serious violent crime, officers are justified in using more force. For minor offenses, the level of acceptable force drops. 2, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat. This is the most important factor. If an officer reasonably believes that there are others in danger, more force may be justified. If there is no real threat, force becomes excessive. 3, whether the suspect is resisting or fleeing. If a person is actively resisting or trying to escape, officers may escalate force, but if the person is cooperating or unable to comply, like someone in medical distress, force must be limited. The key idea from Graham is that reasonableness must be judged based on what an officer knew in the moment, not what we learn later. So, Tennessee versus Garner was from 1985. Tennessee versus Garner, which is the foundation for deadly force rules. This case involved a 15-year-old boy named Edward Garner who was unarmed and trying to climb a fence after a suspected burglary. Even though the officer knew he didn't have a weapon, he shot Garner in the back of the head to stop him from escaping. The Supreme Court ruled that this was unconstitutional. The court said police cannot use deadly force against a fleeing suspect unless that suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical harm. So deadly force is only reasonable when 1, the officer has probable cause, the suspect is dangerous. 2, the threat must be immediate. 3, deadly force must be absolutely necessary to prevent escape. So Garner basically stopped police from having automatic permission to shoot anyone who runs. It forces officers to consider whether the person is actually a threat, not just disobedient. So together these cases create the framework used in every police department in the U.S. today. Graham guides us with everyday encounters and non-deadly force, while Garner limits deadly force. But these cases also raise important questions. What counts as a reasonable threat? How do officers' split-second decisions get evaluated fairly? And how do racial disparities, like studies showing black people are more likely to face force, interact with these standards? These rulings shape modern policing and remain central to debates about excessive force and justice in America. Thank you for listening.